I taught 7th grade at a synagogue in Skokie, Illinois. And if you've ever taught 7th graders, you do, man, if you've ever taught 7th graders, should just leave it at that. You know they are old enough to ask serious moral questions, among other things. One afternoon after class, a student came up to me and asked a question, is it ever okay to lie to a friend? She explained what had happened. Earlier that week, a friend had come up to her at school and had asked very directly whether she liked the outfit she was wearing. My student thought that the outfit was hideous, truly terrible, but she didn't want to hurt her friend's feelings. So she said, "It looks great." And later that day, she began to feel uneasy. Had she done the right thing? Was that lie actually kind, or had it hurt her friend more than it had helped her, because now her friend walked around all day wearing an outfit that everyone else thought looked awful? She wanted a ruling, she wanted a clear answer, and I told her that Reform rabbis don't usually answer questions. We offer help, which can be very frustrating sometimes to people. The early reformers believed that the texts of the ancient rabbis were a source of guidance. The rabbis offer us their wisdom, but as Reformed Jews, we have veto power. So I knew that wouldn't be too comforting to her, so I told her that I would think about it and get back to her next week. So this question, are we ever permitted to lie, goes to the heart of Jewish ethics. On the one hand, truth matters deeply in Judaism. God calls Torah a God of all truth. The rabbis say that the world stands upon three things, and one of them is truth. We're commanded to distance ourselves from falsehood. And I knew that, as usual, the Torah and the rabbis are going to complicate the picture. So to see how, I turn to a moment near the end of the book of Genesis, which we've just finished up. In the aftermath of Jacob's death, Joseph and his brothers are struck by fear. For years, Joseph has supported them and protected them. So let's remember that they were not too nice to Joseph at the beginning of the story. And it is their dad, Jacob, who's basically kept Joseph off of them as far as keeping revenge, as long as committing revenge goes. So they begin to wonder, what if Joseph was only holding back on that revenge out of respect for Jacob? What if now he finally takes that revenge? So I quote from the story, from the Torah itself. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you're to say to Joseph. Please forgive your brothers the sins and their wrongs they committed in mistreating you." And here's the surprise ending. When their message came to him, Joseph wept. Beautiful scene. The Torah never records Jacob saying this. The brothers appear to have invented a message and put it in their father's mouth. In other words, they lie. And yet the Torah doesn't condemn them. Joseph doesn't rebuke them. Instead, he weeps. Their words soften his heart, and the family survives. So the rabbis noticed this immediately. In Genesis Rabbah, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel draws a bold conclusion. From here we learn that one may alter the truth for the sake of peace. One may alter the truth for the sake of peace. The phrase that the rabbis use is mipnei shalom, for the sake of peace. Later, the Talmud expands upon this principle in Yevamot, page 65b. The rabbis teach that it is permitted to deviate from the strict truth also, but more specifically for the sake of family peace. But they go on, it's not for convenience, it's not for self-interest, but to preserve relationships that would otherwise fracture. The Talmud is very careful that permission is not unlimited. The discussion makes clear that this allowance applies primarily to past events not to promises about the future, because promises about the future are prone to deception, they're prone to manipulation. That's what the rabbis really want to avoid. The goal is not deception as a strategy, but peace as a repair. And this is a deeply relational ethic. It recognizes that human beings do not live as isolated moral agents. We live in families, we live in communities, we live in fragile networks of trust. Sometimes insisting on the whole brutal truth does not elevate those relationships, it destroys them. What the Torah seems to teach is not that truth is unimportant, but that truth is not the only value. Peace, dignity, and relationships also matter. Interestingly, this insight is echoed far beyond rabbinic literature. Modern research in evolutionary biology points out that deception is not an anomaly in human behavior. It's ancient. In prehistoric environments where physical survival was the primary objective, the ability to deceive a predator or a rival could mean the difference between life and death. And scholars also note that deception plays a role in competition for resources, in social bonding, including mate selection, as they say. I guess we'd call that, courtship, or they would have in the 19th century. Lying, in other words, evolved not only as a tool of manipulation, but as a strategy for survival and social cohesion. And that does not mean that Judaism endorses lying as a virtue. In fact, Moses Maimonides is clear in the Mishneh Torah that one cannot make lying a regular practice. That is clearly against moral law, but it does mean that our tradition understands something realistic about human life. Absolute transparency is not always humane. Judaism's big question is not, is lying always wrong, but what is the lie serving? What is the lie serving? Is it serving ego, avoidance, control, or is it serving peace? So that brings us back to my 7th grade student. Did she lie? Yes. Was it for personal gain? No. She was trying, albeit clumsily and imperfectly, to protect her friend's feelings and to preserve the friendship. So according to the rabbinic tradition, intention matters. She meant well. At the same time, Judaism would not let us stop the conversation there. Peace is not the same as avoidance. If the pattern becomes one where honesty is never possible, the relationship eventually weakens. The rabbis permit deviation from the truth as a temporary bridge, not as a permanent substitute for integrity. So perhaps the better question for my student was not, this is what I do that drives people crazy when I answer a question with a question. It's a rabbinic trick, So the better question for my student was not, was the lie okay, but what comes next? And that's what I brought to her. What comes next? Does she continue the friendship with care? Does she find ways to be honest that are not cruel? And this is sort of the important one. Can honesty spoken gently, is that good when it's necessary? I mean, silence can be kinder than bluntness, but when is honesty spoken gently really the best thing to do? And that's a skill. Joseph's brothers did not lie to rewrite the past, they lied to survive it. And once peace was restored, Joseph chose mercy over retribution. The lie opened a door, compassion walked through it. So Judaism, this is really how Jewish law, at least by the time we hit the Talmud, this is how it operates. Tension. You're supposed to love truth deeply, to refuse falsehood as a habit, and yet to recognize that human relationships are sometimes sustained not by perfect honesty, but by thoughtful restraint. So when I answered my student before the next session of religious school, I told her the truth. Judaism doesn't give you an easy rule. It provides us with responsibility to weigh truth against peace. To ask not only is this true, but is this kind? Is this necessary? Is this healing? And perhaps that's the hardest lesson of all, that ethical life is often not about having the correct answer, but about learning how to hold competing values with wisdom and with care. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to continue on page 368.